Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the 2024 EMA annual meeting. I'm Steve Smith-Wick, CEO of Master Wall and President of EMA. It's great to have this year's annual meeting back in Texas. We have over 100, I think it's right at 125 people in attendance, and a record number of sponsors supporting the event. I'd like to welcome our members as well as non-members, and I now declare the 2024 annual EMA meeting officially open. It's supposed to be a gavel, just like, won't do that. As many of you already know, the annual meeting has a packed agenda. We have already held our working group meetings, which is a set of meetings we are now holding in person twice a year. Since EMA's programs and services are funded and supported by the members of the EIFS industry, it just makes sense to have working groups to be an integral part of major industry events like this one. You will hear from the available co-chairs and Stephen Sears, EMA's CEO, tomorrow when they come back on stage to inform everyone here on how the working group's recommendations will help make the goals of EMA's strategic plan bring real outcomes. The 2024 annual meeting also has several great networking events, most of which have been generously sponsored. I'd like to acknowledge last night's welcome barbecue, which was sponsored by Master Wall, Sika Facades, and Stowe Corporation. Cornhole board sponsors included Winlock, Wacker, and the Gypsum Association. I hope you all enjoyed the networking luncheon and will enjoy the cocktail reception, which is sponsored by OPCMIA. Tonight's members' dinner will follow and is sponsored by ADEX, Dow, and Drive It Trimco. After the members' dinner, we will have the EIFS Project Awards ceremony, sponsored by St. Gobain Adfors. This year's competition had many great projects. We're very proud of the fact that this year's competition had 25% more entries than we've had ever before. We also have some great panels. Many of you have already heard from Donna and of the Dodge Data Analytics, and thanks go to Drive It Trimco for sponsoring her session. Tomorrow you will hear from several EMA and TLPCA members in a panel discussion about EIFS in Texas. And that session will be sponsored by GMS. So there's a lot of things going on in the industry and at this meeting. I ask everyone to keep this in mind. We all know that EIFS is the best cladding solution ever from a performance and aesthetic financial perspective, but the EIFS industry will not retake its rightful place in the marketplace unless decision makers and influencers also know how great EIFS is. While EMA's staff has and can do a lot to help push the industry forward, it will be a lot easier and more productive if all of us work and support some of these efforts together. That is one reason why we are excited about this year's keynote speaker, Joseph Lstiburek. Joe's session is sponsored by the Wall and Ceiling Alliance and the Western Walls and Ceiling Contractors Association. These groups helped put together a great panel discussion at last year's meeting. We are very pleased that they have sponsored the keynote session for the second year in a row. I would now like to turn it over to Frank Nunez, CEO of the Wall and Ceiling Alliance, and Albert Carrillo, CEO of the Western Walls and Ceiling Contractors Association, who will introduce our keynote speaker.
Thank you. Albert and I drew straws, and I got the short one, so I'll go ahead and present Joe. You probably all heard about Joe in different talks and issues over the years, different papers. He's quite well published and very well spoken throughout our industry for the last couple decades. He has many degrees and awards. He's quite a character, and he can drive cars really fast. Some things beyond that that I first met Joe on was about 20 years ago. There was a MUSE project, Moisture and Exterior Wall Systems, in Canada, and they were starting to develop a best practice guide for construction, and they could build the best wall in a lab. And over a course of about 5 years, Joe was able to eventually convince them that that wouldn't translate out into the built world. And it was quite a task. They would look at us like we were pretty crazy. The mad scientist from Ottawa would laugh at us at some of the things that we showed them that could actually perform. But over time, prevailed and it got out. So I wanted to say that about Joe, that he's continued to bring kind of translation and common sense to the built environment. And I think that's what you'll hear today. You might need some translation. You can talk to me later after the event, but phrases such as was, would, and things of that may be a little challenging, but I'll help you with that. So for now, let me present to you Joe Lstiburek.
I never forgot the Muse stuff. Oh man, oh man, oh man, oh man. Thank you for that warm introduction, Frank. It's an honor and a pleasure to come and talk to all you folks here who've gone through near-death experiences as an industry and come out on the winning end. And again, I'm insanely proud and pleased to talk to my fellow travelers. I'm going to share some stuff about way back when that you might not be familiar with. I'm going to basically embarrass myself and lose all credibility and then try to convince you that I'm going to be right later on. I'm going to work on it. So this is how I spent 1979, 1980, and 1981. This is what I looked like. Young punk kid, 27 years old. I had an aerospace engineering degree. I couldn't get a job, so I ended up in construction. So when somebody says it's not rocket science, I can attest to that. So I ended up building homes, and I thought I was smarter than everybody else. And of course, I wasn't. It's the arrogance of youth. But I ran into old people that spoke slowly and used small words with me to explain things. And so I learned by making mistakes. And so I'd like to point out that mistakes have made me the man I am today. That was a joke. You're not laughing at that. So this is the first house I did. The first serious house. It's super insulated. It is an EIFS house before we even knew what the word was. And it's got windows on the south, nice overhangs. It's got R40 walls, R60 roof, and it had triple glazed windows, which was unheard of back then. This is the wall section. It was a CMU wall with a skim coat of parge coat, 8-inch expanded polystyrene, covered with a stucco brew that I brewed myself. I created a polymer-based synthetic stucco before there were polymer-based synthetic stuccos. I took stuff, we were repairing the Gardiner Expressway in Toronto, Ontario, and we were patching it with a polymer-based fiber-reinforced stuff. I said, wow, this could actually work on the building. And so this building here is a polymer-based glass fiber reinforced low E glass EIFS before I'd ever heard of the word. This is the section. Wow. This would be a high performance, greeny weeny, carbon neutral, save the planet, when the carbon cult comes for us. That was a joke. The carbon cult is coming for all of us. See if you if you can't do math or physics, you go into activism, and then you run for Congress, right? So yeah, it's continuous thermal insulation, and so you all thought I hated you. I was doing you before you were doing you, and I didn't know why it worked. I got lucky, all right? I wasn't smart. I mean, I was smart enough to know I was stupid. Does that? Okay. The big news was I realized that there are only two kinds of windows in the world: windows that leak and windows that will leak. And windows are like people. As windows and people get old, we leak. You freaking youngsters have no idea what the hell's coming to you. You know, my son asked, "Dad, I didn't know why you had trouble sleeping." And I said, "Son, sleeping is not the issue." What was special was that I wrapped the lamina into the opening. So when the when the window leaked, we directed the water to the exterior. A leak is not a leak if the client never sees it. Repeat after me. A leak is not a leak if the client never sees it. And so the other thing that I learned was that we needed two-stage joints, because I started talking to old people who were clearly way smarter than the 26-year-old young punk kid. And so we needed an airtight interior seal around the punched openings of the windows and doors, and then a seal on the outside, and the airspace between the outer seal and the inner seal needed to be weeped to the exterior. So when the window leaked, the water would be directed to the exterior, but the primary air seal was on the inside, not on the outside. And I invented something that I wasn't smart enough to patent, but here it is. How do you stick 8 and 10 inches of expanded polystyrene to a freaking concrete block wall? And the answer is I went to the local store and got a lead plug, got a long freaking gutter nail, and a plastic washer. And all you'd do is you'd push the foam against the wall, drill through the damn thing with a really, really long freaking concrete drill bit, and push the whole damn thing with the plug through it, bang it, and you're tighter than a Scotsman in a bar. Hey, it freaking works. It works today. You could actually use this if you get the lead out. Oh, God. All right, that was the first one. Then I did another house in southern Ontario, Schaumburg. Put in more windows, but it was the same approach, except the block wall was a split rib decorative block wall where we put the split rib facing the inside as the beautiful interior finished, and then put all of the insulation on the outside. Why is it important to put the insulation outside? Well, because as a child growing up in Canada, I learned, as all children did, when it got cold, we pulled the sweater over the outside of us. We didn't eat it and shove it into our ribs. You want to be a sweater wearer, not a sweater eater. You're the sweater industry, right? Okay, that was supposed to be really good, and you guys just frickin' didn't laugh. Coated the entire surface with dead dinosaur juice. And it was important that the windows were pushed to the outside, because you all know how incredibly crazy complicated it is to return your beautiful finish into the window, right? See, architects are born with a genetic defect. It's the innie, outie, tweenie gene. Is the window an innie, an outie, or a tweenie? And the best windows are Audis. Okay, this is one day, tonight, maybe alcohol will be involved. You'll understand that that's actually really important to understand. There's the interior finish. I won an award for this. I got to run Canada's R2000 program after that. I was the youngest director of research in the history of the Canadian home builders because of this. There's the expanded polystyrene going on the outside. There's my homebrew polymer-based synthetic stucco that I stole from the Gardner Expressway. You can look this up. And I said, wow, this is, kind of neat. Let's go closer to Toronto. You see, I could only do stuff really, really far away where people couldn't say you can't do it. And as I started doing it, I was being able to get closer and closer and closer. Okay. So we, buried most of it in the ground. Windows on the south side. And again, the concrete masonry unit with the dead dinosaur juice and 8 inches of expanded polystyrene and the homebrew polymer-based EIFS. Super insulated, unvented roof assembly. There's the stuff. People wondering, what are you using with it? What are you doing with this? Nobody ever buys stuff like this. It's just you don't need to know. Yeah. Still up. The owners still own it, and they're still happy to talk to me. You see, after a half century, if the owners still talk to the original builder and don't shoot them, that's a kind of an important. I was a ski patroller for 25 years because I was broke, and so I was asked to, anyway, so I did a house up there. I finally got close. This is all the windows on the south side. This again was a block wall with dead dinosaur juice and 8 inches of expanded polystyrene and my home brew. I took it seriously. You shouldn't have windows on the north, west, and east. I married an architect, and she just, wow, we're never going to allow you to design a house ever again. And just, when you think about it, engineer marries architect, the therapy bills have been very expensive over the last 40 years. But the energy efficient trusses, the windows are Audis. I decided that I didn't have to coat with dinosaur juice. I just needed to coat around the window opening, right? We called it raccooning, like raccoon eyes, with the fluid applied that we brewed ourselves, because none of this existed. There's my spots, and I discovered stucco pox. You're not getting the humor. You got it. Stucco pox, where with the wrong light, if it's light colored, the water absorbs differently, and there's a thermal bridge, and holy shit, this looks like crap. I invented it. I was the disease vector. We know how to deal with it easily now, right? We, can't cantilever the washer and put a little layer of EIFS or something over it. But at the time, I didn't know. The earlier ones, the colors, nobody noticed. So I got into trouble when I first said white stucco matters. Oh, all right. All right, all right. I got lucky. Then industry crashed and went back and got my master's degree and found old people who knew stuff and introduced me to something called physics. Yeah. One of the most famous equations in physics is the Arrhenius equation. It's the third most famous, which is why nobody teaches it in high school. See, we don't actually teach anything in high school anymore except telling our kids how to feel good about themselves while they're unable to function in the modern world. This is the equation, and the important thing to notice is that whenever you have letters above big letters, danger, 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 it means the thing is exponential. It's a whoosh, not a whir. Whir, linear. Whoosh, bad. Whir, good. Whoosh, bad. Are there any architects here? That's why I'm speaking this way, so that you can explain it to the engineer later. So every 10 degree Kelvin, that's 18 degrees Fahrenheit, using GeoMath, that's a field of math that I invented, that's around 20 degrees. Every 20 degree Fahrenheit increase in temperature, you double badness. That's a 50% reduction in material life. So things that get hot don't last very long. Everybody with me on this? So what happens when we put in an awful lot of insulation and change the color to whiteness? There's no energy available because things aren't hot anymore. And we don't have much energy going from the outside in and the inside out. You guys know that, right? Nodding here. Okay. If things get wet, it's okay if they dry. Wetting followed by drying is okay. What people don't understand is that drying can only happen if there's an exchange of energy. So what happens to drying as we dramatically reduce the energy exchange? Things stay wetter longer. So what are we doing with the drying potential of new buildings? You can say this. We're dramatically reducing them. Are we making them more durable? No. You know, there's no such thing as a free thermodynamic lunch. That's the second law of thermodynamics, which we'll talk about. It was put to music by the second best guitarist of all time, Mark Knopfler. You can't get your money for nothing and your chicks for free. That was pretty good. So a black EPDM membrane roof in the middle of the afternoon runs at 180 degrees Fahrenheit. And I changed that to a white EPDM membrane roof that runs at 120 degrees Fahrenheit. Which membrane lasts longer? You can say this, it's all right, the white membrane. But which roof lasts longer? The black one, because it has a higher drying potential, right? When we changed the membrane colors, we had to introduce air barriers and vapor barriers. Which is easier to build? Which has to be maintained more? You can't get your money for nothing and your chicks for free. Now, I'm not telling you don't be energy efficient, but you have to understand that there are consequences, right? And the only people that don't understand consequences are the people that are telling us that we should build better in green. The green cult doesn't know math and physics. That's why they're a cult. Wait until the carbon cult comes for you, right? The two cults? Oh my God, and guess what? We call those people clients. Right? So what's our job? Our job is to not be stupid, right? So we actually have to do better than anybody else because we're in the business of changing the energy flow. And most people don't understand that it comes with consequences. Now, I'm an engineer. I'm born with a genetic defect. It's called the efficiency gene. I can't help myself. But I'm an old engineer. And because I'm an old engineer, I understand what it means to be stupid. All right? And so stupid has made me the man that I am today. A damn good engineer who basically believes in multiple systems redundancy. We call that the clean underwear approach. If you have good judgment, you buy pants that fit, but just in case you have a belt, in case the belt fails, you have suspenders. In case the belt and the suspenders fail, you have clean underwear. And that's the business you're in. The three principal damage functions are all operated under the Arrhenius equation. They're water, heat, and ultraviolet light. They're not additive, they're multiplicative. So what gets the most water, heat, and ultraviolet light? Where the building touches the sky, right? That's the biggest risk. What's nice about that is if you screw up the roof, the stupid hurts fast. Stupid should hurt quickly. When you're a kid, you put your hand on the stove, shit, ow, it hurts, you know. The action and the failure is very quick. And the problem is, with energy efficiency, the stupid took 10 to 20 years. Now, because we're even putting more efficiency in place and we're changing the materials, the stupidity is coming sooner. Yay! Engineered wood is an insult to wood and to engineers. OSB is the spam of wood. Spam is the OSB of luncheon meats. Youngsters don't understand. We used to go to places called forests. And we used to cut trees down and cut them into boards and build boats out of them and sail them around the world. Try doing that with a sheet of OSB. Are we going to build out of 1,000-year-old trees and rocks? No, we're going to build out of incredibly moisture-sensitive materials that are going to get wet unless we intervene, and there's not going to be energy available in order to do what? Dry them. We used to line our buildings with plaster. Now we line it with paper-faced drywall. We're building paper buildings. Even the dumbest of the three little pigs didn't build his house out of paper. So let's build with moisture-sensitive materials, insulate up the yin-yang wazoo. Those are 2 metric terms. Yin-yang is 2 wazoos. So the reason I left Canada was because of metric. Okay, that was funny, but none of you got it. And so this is the business that we're in, aren't we? Aren't we selling energy efficiency? And we have to sell not just energy efficiency, but we have to sell comfort and durability and health, right? It's important not to kill the building, not to make it sick. It's important not to kill the people and not to make it sick. And all of it is different because we've changed the energy flow in the materials. And the people who don't understand it are giving us the requirements, right? Come on, you can actually share information. All right. Second law of thermodynamics. This is kind of fun because there are 4 laws of thermodynamics, but we only number them up to 3 because we forgot one. So we had the first law, the second, and the third, and somebody said, shit, we forgot one. We couldn't put it between the first and the second or between the second and the third because all of the textbooks would have to be renumbered. And it was too important to be left for the 4th, so we called it the 0th. So the 0th law really means if A equals B and B equals C, A equals C. Now, I didn't understand why we needed a law. Didn't some dead Greek guy figure it out 2,500 years ago by the name of Aristotle? But apparently he wrote it in Greek, and it's all Greek to me. So let's translate the second law from a crazy equation. And here's what it is. Heat flows from warm to cold. Why? Because. That's it. See, things are a law if you can't develop it from fundamental principles. Nobody knows why it's from warm to cold. It just freaking is. When it is, and you have an explanation for it, we call it a law. When somebody says the science is settled, that would be an arts graduate. When they say follow the science, oh, you're from Harvard. The science is never settled. You never prove science, you can only disprove science. Again, we used to teach this, but anyway, we can only disprove science. Nobody's disproved this. If you could show that heat flows from cold to warm, you'd get a first-class ticket to Scandinavia to get a Nobel Prize in physics, and they would build a statue of you in your high school parking lot. So warm to cold because, I guess even better, moisture flows from warm to cold. Why? Because. Moisture flows from more to less. Why? You could do this experiment at home. You could take something wet and touch something dry. The dry thing becomes wet. Son of a bitch, who knew? Germans in the 1930s, yeah. Air flows from a higher pressure to a lower pressure, and gravity acts down. That's the second law. Of course, it's written in Latin, and nobody gets it, so I have to translate it. This is it. Now let's look at the two moisture ones. Warm to cold and more to less. Whoa! I'm going to tell you something that's a deep secret. Only old people know this. Most of the time, they act in the same direction. How much of the time? Well, 80, 90% of the time. Based on what? I'm an old guy. I know this stuff. So we use warm to cold as a surrogate for more to less. That's important. What does it mean? Most of the time, the water ends up on the cold spot. I don't need to do a calculation. It ends up on the cold freaking spot. Woo! What happens when they act in the opposite direction? More to less wins. Rock beats scissor, paper beats rock. More to less beats warm to cold, but most of the time they end up in the same direction. And that's real important to normal people like us, because of course we're all normal. Most of us can go into a building and say, that's going to be cold and that's going to be warm. The water's going to end up on the cold spot. Most people can look at a set of drawings. That'll be warm, that'll be cold. All right? Very few people can go into a building and feel and sense vapor pressures. And those that can also see dead people. So you use warm to cold as a surrogate for more to less, and it comes pretty easy. What you think about is that keep the water from the cold spot or make the cold spot warm. What business are you in? You're making the cold spot warm. Yay! Woo! Okay, you're not freaking excited. You're sweater wearers and you're making the cold spot warm. Yay! Wow, this is a tough crowd. But we don't use those words because we don't want civilians to know. So we call it the thermal gradient and the concentration gradient, and thermal diffusion and molecular diffusion. Now, if you are an old school English graduate, you could maybe understand some of this, and that's unacceptable, so we call it diffusion, which nobody understands, and it runs according to the thermodynamic potential. Thermodynamic. Don't you want to buy like Vegematic? And here's a map of the thermodynamic potential, the psychopathic chart. We added color, it's the psychedelic chart. You know what this is a map of? Most of the time the water ends up on the cold spot. Luke, turn off your calculation. Go with the force. The water's on the cold spot. Okay, you don't need to do a hydrothermal analysis by, a computer program written by, The only German who ever had a sense of humor, Hartwig Kunzel in the Wolfe calculation. Okay, you're not getting the humor there. The clients want the calculation, so you give them one. But you always know you calibrate the calculation to make sure that the water ends up on the cold spot. It's called tuning the model. Whenever you read a consultant's report, we used a tuned hydrothermal analysis. That meant we made sure the model gave us the right answer, because before we started the goddamn calculation, we knew what the right answer was, and we get to charge you $5,000. I call that a tax on stupid people. It's very profitable, and the price was based by Hartwig because he drives a Porsche, and that buys 4 Porsche tires. I told you he had a sense of humor. All right, guess what? What's warm and cold also depends on where you are, right? This is my map. This is a map of hygrothermal regions. This is my big contribution 30 years ago. ASHRAE stole it from me. Bastards. Ask me where I got it. Joe, where did you get it? I stole it. Who'd you steal it from? A dead Russian. If you're going to steal stuff from a Russian, it's important that the Russian is dead. This is a map of Köppen climates. Wait, you remember the Köppen climate classification? So you're basically saying that your map of hygrothermal regions was based on the plant kingdom? Yeah, because I felt the plant kingdom was a better judge of temperature, relative humidity, and rainfall than architects and engineers. Ponder that. I created another map. Okay, that's the Köppen climate, right? This is my map that ASHRAE stole. This is what I stole from the Russian. Okay, I created another map. This is a map of rainfall. I decided to use increments of 20. 0 to 20 inches of rain, 20 to 40, 40 to 60, over 60. Why did I pick 20? Well, when I had 10, the map was too complicated. When it was 30, it wasn't complicated enough. So you're telling me you base this on feelings. Yeah, that's a great song. So you take this map, and you superimpose it with this map, and you get the IEC climate map. So I'm responsible for the IECC climate map. You're supposed to say, Joe, thank you, wow. All right, so this is a giant freaking approximation that I pulled out of my ass. Right? Okay, well, there are going to be places where on one side of the freaking road is climate zone 3, and the other side is climate zone 4, and you're telling me you have a different code requirement? That's nuts. This is just supposed to get you in the neighborhood. Say you're in the middle of climate zone 4 and you're building on the water, and 150 yards away you're on the top of a hill. Do you really think you have the same freaking exposure? This was never meant to replace judgment. This is crazy. So we have computer simulation and lack of judgment. What does this mean? Well, the first thing you know, well, Joe's a millionaire. And folks said, Joe, move away from there. America's the place you ought to be. So I loaded up my Ford rusted out Tempo and moved to Chicago. All right. How many people have heard of the perfect wall? Came from me. Where'd I get it? I stole it. All I did was take a 1950s black and white and I colorized it. I'm the Ted Turner of building science. And I added a clever name to it to get people to start using it, right? And so all it says is the best wall is put the insulation on the outside from the 1950s. That's what you do. You are in the business of the perfect wall. But you screwed up because you forgot that the perfect wall has to have a water control layer, an air control or vapor control layer, and a thermal control layer. You're all into the thermal control layer and you screwed up water, didn't you? You can admit this. But now you've got it all worked out, right? You actually have the perfect freaking wall. And you ought to sell it as the perfect freaking wall. You're going to have to leave out the freaking, because people will freak out. All right, this part drives people crazy. Oh, you have to figure out where the dew point is. No, you don't. You just look at the wall and it tells you right off the damn. Okay, I'll help you through this, right? So this is the argument. You know, you have it 70 degrees inside, 0 degrees outside. The bold black line is the temperature gradient. And you do something stupid like have 50% relative humidity inside at 70 degrees Fahrenheit when it's cold outside. So you're basically listening to the Harvard School of Public Health. Okay, if you can't do math or physics, go into biology. Can't do biology, go into medicine. Can't do medicine, join the Center for Disease Control in Atlanta. Who say, gee, you should put in a humidifier, right? Didn't they, you know, so the biggest thing about humidity, you know, because they make the building healthy. No, they make the building sick. You're a moron. You know, these are the folks that who know anything about medicine, like who's the bunch in Minnesota, the Mayo Clinic? They say if you're going to run a humidifier, use distilled water and clean it every day. Happens all the time, doesn't it? You know, humidifiers are bioweapons exported by ISIS. So the 50% relative humidity, 70 degrees Fahrenheit, when you cool that air down, the humidity goes up to 100%. At the temperature it gets to 100%, we call it the dew point. Everybody knows that, right? And the dew point temperature happens to be 49 degrees Fahrenheit from the psychopathic chart. I cleverly put a dashed line there, put a big dot there. That's where the dew point is, according to all of the calculations. Except it never freaking happens there. Never. It always happens on the back side of the damn sheathing. Never. Okay, oops. Well, why? Well, because I'm not sure whether, again, they taught this, and to you folks, because you're American high school graduates. Oh, come on. You know, you gotta be I'm an American now for 30 years. Relax. I can poke fun at me. All right, so water can exist in the liquid form at 32 degrees Fahrenheit and can exist at the solid form at 32 degrees Fahrenheit. Did you know that? Yeah. To change 1 pound of water 1 Fahrenheit degree requires you to add or subtract 1 British thermal unit, 1 BTU, right? But to change phase from 32 degrees Fahrenheit liquid to 32 degrees Fahrenheit solid, you have to take out 180 BTUs. That's the change in phase energy. If you have 1 pound of water in the vapor form and you want to change it from 1 pound of water in the liquid form, you have to take out 970 BTUs. These are big effing numbers. The problem is that there's not enough thermal mass in fiberglass or cellulose to handle the change in phase energy. So you need not only a dew point temperature, but you need a surface with sufficient thermal mass to handle the change in phase energy. That's called a condensing surface. And the only condensing surface is the backside of the sheathing. So I don't have to do a stupid calculation. I know where the damn condensing surface is, where the dew point is, right? Right. So I make this warm. Woo! You're not excited. But the wall in the old houses wasn't the first condensing surface. It was the crappy window, because it was the coldest surface, right? And crappy windows saved older buildings, because they were dehumidifiers, right? The only thing that got damaged was the sill, right? So what happened when the window industry made double glazing and triple glazing? They moved the condensing surface from the inside surface of the window to the wall cavity. And the first thing that began to happen was the paint would fall off, right? Gee, how come the paint fell off my building? Well, you had better windows. Bastards made better windows and the paint fell off. Well, why didn't the wall rot? Well, because we had fiberboard and plywood, which breathed. Then we changed it to OSB that doesn't. And now the condensing surface is where? In the wall cavity, which is really, really bad. But you can save their sorry asses by doing what? Wearing the sweater. Yay! Okay, I don't know. So I have a lab at the university. I used to teach at the University of Toronto until they decided that I couldn't teach undergraduates because they're all snowflakes. So I went to minus 40 degrees Fahrenheit on one side and plus 70 on the other and 50% relative humidity. And I said, to the youngsters, calculate where the dew point is. Dr. Joe, Dr. Joe, Dr. Joe, the dew point was supposed to be here, but all this stuff ends up there. Read the footnotes. So you never freaking read the damn footnotes, which say you need a condensing surface. I can't tell you how many times people make you do a dew point calculation. I just kind of laugh and roll my eyes, and I charge them a lot of money because, again, it's a tax on stupid people. You can look it up in a physics book. So this is the way you're supposed to look at things. You plot the average temperature over the course of the year, monthly averages. That's all you need. You don't need hourly, monthly. Things don't change that quickly. So this is for Chicago. That's where I used to live. If you keep the humidity during the coldest month below 20%, you don't need an air barrier, you don't need a vapor barrier, you don't need continuous insulation, you don't need anything. That's what old buildings did, right? Because they didn't have high moisture. But man, you warm it up to 35%, you're screwed, right? That's a technical term, screwed. If you go to 50 and listen to the Harvard School of Public Health and the Centers for Disease Control in Atlanta, you're destroying the building. The only people that are happy are the fire people because the buildings are too wet to burn. You guys are a tough crowd. But if you put continuous insulation on the outside, right, you warm up the temperature of the condensing surface so you could do stupider things like put in a humidifier. And so what are you in the business of doing? Saving people from the Harvard School of Public Health and the Center for Disease Control in Atlanta. All right, Joe, there must be a reason that the medical community says this. Well, yeah, there is a good reason. The alveoli, the little bubbles that are at the end of your lungs, you got this distribution system with bubbles. If the humidity is high, you can fight off basically viral infections, right? The other is as the humidity goes up in the interior air, the tiny particles get bigger because the water sticks on them and they fall out of the air faster. Tiny particles, PM 2.5, are floating in the air for hours. If you increase the humidity, they fall out in minutes. So higher humidity had less bad shit in the air and made your lungs work better, but that caused the buildings to rot and be moldy. You're not getting you can't get your money for nothing and your chicks for free. But if they had EIFS on the outside, yeah, you could do humidification. Okay, apparently, okay. And this, of course, is new information that came back to us from 1949. See, it's hard to. So now we do 8,800 calculations, one for each hour, add them all up, and they're no more accurate than this. But this, you can charge a lot of money for. So ask me if I do these. But how do I make sure that they're correct? Because I always do this. It's called a tuned model. A tuned model means I made it give you the right answer by using the old school. Okay, Of course you're going to do these calculations with woofie, because that's what they want. You don't get the dough unless you do the show. Repeat after me. You don't get the dough unless you do the show, but you want the show to be correct. So the building code table tells you what thermal resistance percentage you need on the outside to control condensation. You should thank me, that's from me. You're welcome, Joe. So when they ask, well, what R value should you have with EIFS, figure out what the climate zone is and make sure that the ratio is working for you. And the assumption is 35% interior relative humidity. If you go to 50, increase everything by 50%. You're welcome. You're in the business of keeping the Center for Disease Control in Atlanta and the Harvard School of Public Health from being morons. Plus you get to make the building more comfortable, safer, more durable. Greenie weenies are going to love you. Tastes great, less filling. You're going to have to clean up the marketing a little bit. They don't let me talk to customers. So this is your future, isn't it? Except you needed to add drainage. You didn't. Well, Joe, you didn't put drainage up. Well, I didn't need to because it didn't matter if a little block got a little wet. But OSB, or paper-faced gypsum board, you're doomed. Well, how come the Germans got away with it? Well, because we bombed the shit out of them in the Second World War. And there was all brick and block and rubble and shit. They built it up and invented drive it and stow, right? Drive it and stow is awesome for a mass wall. Of course, when you exported it here, it was a freaking disaster, right? And that led to all the litigation. And I was saying, wait, you need water control, you need a drainage gap. And you all hated me. You were so pissed off at me, I woke up with a piece of drive it and stow in my bed one morning. But I was on your side. Okay, rain. I spared no expense at providing a demonstration. I'm using an old-fashioned garden hose. This is clearly a Canadian. He's a hoser. This is not an ASTM test. It's practical. ASTM stands for another stupid test method. Come on, you know that. So what happens? Well, you put a hole in the wall and you have a look and, 5 to 10% of the water on the surface passes through. Well, how do you know that? Well, we've done it a lot. In fact, I got ASHRAE Standard 160 to finally say, okay, 10% passes through the cladding. And so, all right, but it's actually passing through the brick? No. Is it passing through the mortar? No, it's passing through the joint between the mortar and the brick, right? And so how do we handle it? Well, we put tar paper up with a small gap for drainage, right? Well, where'd the 25 millimeters or 1 inch come from? Well, that was the thickness of a mason's knuckles and fingers. If attorneys laid brick, it would have been 3/8 of an inch. What actually do you need? Well, a continuous 30-second. Well, how do we know that? I was one of the people that tested vertical beads of adhesive with foam against a water controlator so you could get the damn 90% drainage efficiency. That was the only way I could get the drive it and stow out of my bed to show that, it doesn't take much to provide water management, right? Right, okay. Wow. Your stuff is trowel and fluid applied, right? It's freaking awesome because you don't have to explain to people good, bad. The most common mistake in water management is reverse lap of the water, of the flashing and we need to get these people out of the gene pool. In the old days, wild animals would kill and eat the weak and the stupid. That was a pretty good system. Now we put them in management. You don't need a freaking inch. Yeah, all right, fine, whatever. All right, so if I go too fast for me, stop me, but The taller the column of water, the more it weighs. It's called gravity. The Earth sucks. Okay, well, we don't call it that because normal people would figure that out, so we call it hydrostatic pressure. Hydrostatic pressure is a big word that means gravity. Let me repeat this. Hydrostatic pressure is a big word that means gravity. Whoa. This is a hockey puck. And it's most commonly found in the net behind a Toronto Maple Leafs goalie. 1967 is the last time Toronto won the Stanley Cup. That was when I was listening to music to Paul McCartney's band Before Wings. So if you take a hockey puck and you put it against a wall that's got Tyvek on it, and you put brick up, the hockey puck basically represents a hunk of mortar that's suspended in the wall, right? So I've got plywood or OSB, I've got Tyvek or Typar, I put a hockey puck and a brick veneer up, so I got a hunk of mortar. And when water passes through the brick and it hits the hockey puck, it drains to either side. We go, well, who cares? 2 hockey pucks, who cares? 3 hockey pucks, oh shit. Because now I'm building up what? Hydrostatic pressure. Let me explain about leaks. Don't listen to LinkedIn because they're morons. That's actually redundant, LinkedIn. So for water to leak, you need water, a hole, and a pressure. So you can get rid of the water, good luck. You can get rid of the hole, good luck. Or get rid of the pressure, which makes the most sense. Getting rid of the pressure. This is really bad because you get hydrostatic head. And 1 inch of water is equivalent to the wind force of 35 miles per hour. You can get hurricane force loads, rainwater, in the absence of a hurricane simply because you're not draining the water. You're kidding. No, I'm not. And so if I have a small drainage gap, I don't care about the damn hole, right? You need to drain the rain on the plane. How many people have heard of the drainage plane? You know who came up with that? Yeah, alcohol and a musical were involved. I was dating my wife-to-be, an architect, and we were watching My Fair Lady. In the middle of My Fair Lady, Eliza Doolittle says, "The rain in Spain stays mainly on the plain." I turned to Betsy and I said, "We need to drain the rain on the plain." And she says, "Where is that blasted drain?" "On the drainage plane." I presented that to the Boston Society of Architects the next day. It's now in the code. That story's actually true. I was deposed on it in a lawsuit, and they were trying to prove that it wasn't true, and we found the proof, and the judge burst out laughing. Whenever the judge laughs with you, I won a client $100 million. I now have Hardy board for the rest of my life. Okay, that's a bad joke. So 250 pascals is 1 inch. That's 45 miles per hour. So 1 inch of water, 45. 4 inches of water, 90 miles per hour. Hurricane force loads if you don't drain the damn water. And what are you now doing? You're draining the water. Yay, except nobody knows because you do a lousy job of telling people. We need better marketing. Notice the word we? On your side. So anyway, we did all kinds of tests and stuff. The only people that didn't support me were you guys. Well, you fucking sued us. Well, I was just trying to get your attention. So DuPont came up with a 32nd of an inch because of John Straub. Professor Straub's doctoral dissertation was on drainage. And I worked with, at the time, USG had a mechanically attached EIFS system. And so DuPont came up with a product called stucco wrap. So you'd put the stucco wrap up, and then you'd attach your EPS and nail it and put your stucco on it. Well, the board of directors of USG said, with all the litigation, this was 1990, it's too dangerous. We're just going to get out of the EIFS business. So DuPont was left without a client. You know, stucco wrap was supposed to be used behind synthetic stucco, but their marketing people simply sold it with regular stucco. So what happened when you put regular stucco over stucco wrap? It filled the grooves and it bonded. You lost water repellency. It was a freaking disaster. So I had a lot of fun with them. I said that the only product you couldn't use stucco wrap with was stucco. I got sued big time in California, but I bought a lot of stucco wrap because I put what over it? Tar paper. And the tar paper acted as a bond break. When I finally talked to the marketing people at DuPont, I said, call it drain wrap, not stucco wrap. So they're making a lot of money now. And I have to earn my money talking to you people in Dallas because I wasn't smart enough to patent it. Shit. We called it the rain screen, right? And we figured out what the optimal spacing was based on the size of basically washers. This was Professor Straub's, well, he wasn't a professor then, but this is his doctoral dissertation. And that figured out what the gap was. That's why your vertical bead of adhesive works. Yeah, washers. So my product was the beer screen. It was a combination of Budweiser and Dow, and apparently that never went anywhere. Drain the rain on the plane. If you want to save cash, flash. Don't be a dope slope. That's been my career for 50 years. This is what a flashing looks like. This is how you integrate it. Anybody not get this? Well, the people that are building for you, right? Right. 10% of all of the failures on a job site are reverse lapping of flashing. It's insane. Remember, it didn't matter in the old days when we built out 1,000-year-old trees and rocks and didn't have energy. Now we have water-sensitive materials and we don't have energy. What are the odds that we're going to have even less energy? Yeah, all right. Stucco evolved as a barrier system, right? Yeah, 3,000 years of experience. You know, Sumerians, then the Greeks stole it from the Sumerians, and then the Romans stole it from the Greeks, right? It goes back a long, 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 long way. So you have a mass wall, and you put expanded polystyrene attached to it with your layer. It works, because when it leaks into something that doesn't care. That was the basis of stow and drive it in Germany, right? Freaking awesome. When you exported it across the Pacific or the Atlantic, and you put it on paper-faced gypsum board and plywood and OSB, it was a disaster, wasn't it? Come on, you know, it was horrible. Absolutely freaking horrible. Face sealed, not water managed. Worked great in Europe. Bad idea in North America with steel studs, wood studs, and no water management. And you went from the near death to being one of the most successful water management organizations around, right? No, really, I mean, people buy your stuff just because they don't even put your stucco on it, they just buy your water management stuff because your water management is the best there is, right? Come on, yeah. Of course, before that happened, we needed to destroy thousands of buildings. And my favorite is the hotel industry, right? You know, everything, all of the hotels were basically, you know, metal studs, gypsum board, you glue some EIFS to it and your stuff, and of course the windows always were watertight, right? Yeah. Then we exported that technology to the home builders, right? And so, wow, yeah. OSB doesn't come that way new. The owners want everybody to know that son of a bitch Eddie built it. There's Eddie. Okay, that's not. This is a very, 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 very famous, insanely famous smart water management guy. His name is Steve Ruggiero, and he's with Simpson, Gumpertz, and Hager. And he's laughing because he knows that I'm going to be embarrassing him for 35 years. But the real reason that this picture is so good is look at the triangular patterns of water. Windows leak at their corners, right? We call it mustaching. When you have a mulled window, it's a Van Dyke. Don't do stupid things. Well, how could you take this and make it stupider? Well, easy. Build a hotel and put vinyl wallpaper on the inside. Because vinyl wallpaper is a vapor barrier, right? It's made out of vinyl. That's why we call it vinyl wallpaper. Yeah. What are the odds that you're going to have a building that's air conditioned? Let's air condition a hotel and put in a rooftop fan and take air out of all the bathrooms. So hotels were buildings that sucked with condoms on the wrong side. And the only way to make it worse was to put what? Face-sealed EIFS, right? Come on. Yeah. And so how do we fix it? You need a water-managed EIFS, and you need to get rid of the vinyl. What was the most difficult thing to get rid of? The vinyl. Let me tell you a little bit about mold. Mold doesn't have an internal digestive system. For it to get nutrients, it has to exude a digestive enzyme outside of its body. So you got vinyl on the inside of an air-conditioned hotel. The moisture's going and accumulates at the vinyl drywall interface, right? And that's where the mold wants to be. And so it exudes an enzyme outside of its body. So basically it pukes on the back of the vinyl. And the mold puke reacts with the plasticizers, and you get pink and yellow spots. We call that the Marriott measles, the Radisson rash, and the Hyatt hives. Okay, that's funny. I got a call from Bill Marriott. What? I was just trying to be funny. He said, no. I'm not calling because I'm mad. Can you help me fix my house? You're not getting that. EIFS has no longer issues. It worked great on mass walls. Now we have spectacular water management. And let me tell you what the future is going to be, because you don't believe it. You realize that steel is more conductive than wood? Steel is 300 times more conductive than wood. You know how I know this? I've never seen wood wiring. I've never seen a wood frying pan. Well, once. So how do you handle steel studs? You have to insulate on the outside of them, right? And insulating a steel stud cavity is a thermodynamic obscenity. So if you take a 6-inch steel stud, you put in an R20 fiberglass bat, you end up with an effective thermal resistance of about R4, which is kind of dumb. So why build out of steel? Okay, what? Visit Australia. They build high-rises with concrete frame, and they have wood studs that are fire-treated that they put fluffy shit in and wear a sweater. You can do this. Well, we have to burn the wall. Well, shit, yeah. Yeah, and you don't have to use EPS. You could use mineral wool. You could use wood fibers with borates. You could use Gloria Vanderbilt's blue jeans with, shit in them. I don't care. You can do all of this, and you're doing nothing. You could get you could get ahead of the carbon cult. Wood is good. It grows on trees. That's your... God, I'm trying to help you guys, and you're just, oh, well, we hate spray foam. Well, don't freaking use spray foam. Believe it or not, they now have greeny-weeny mixtures of spray foam that have less carbon energy than mineral wool. Then fiberglass, not mineral wool. So if you want to, don't get rid of your spray foam, get rid of your fiberglass first. But you could get maybe an expanded polystyrene that has got an insanely low carbon footprint, right? Use mineral wool, use rock wool, use, timber HP. You can use all of those stuff, right? Your fundamental system is correct. Change the materials to suck up to your clients. Sorry, to do marketing. Okay, last little bit of physics. Rain, I got a cup and it's raining. There's no wind. The odd rain droplet falls into it. It drains out. If it's windy, the wind blows into the cup, but the wind fills up the cup. So you're not going to have wind-driven rain because the wind is already in the cup, so more rain can't enter because the cup is already filled with wind. This will require a hooker tonight, a John Lee hooker, 1 bourbon, 1 scotch, and 1 beer. You're supposed to say that's a Thorogood for you youngsters. So I'm basically pressurizing the cup. So I'm not going to have wind-driven rain enter a pressurized cup because the cup is already filled with wind, right? So if I put a baffle over it, and I have a hole in the baffle, the hole is in the baffle large enough to pressurize the cup, the entire pressure is taken on the back of the cup, there's no pressure on the front, which means it's not going to enter even if I have a hole. Whoa! You should be excited about this, and apparently you're not excited about it, because that's the whole function of glazing systems, right? You want that seal to remain dry forever. So let's put it in a gutter. That would be stupid. But if I elevate it off the bottom of the gutter, and I have an outer seal and an inner seal, and I put a hole at the bottom, I'm going to pressurize the gutter, which means the entire pressure is taken on the inner seal. There's no pressure on the outer seal, which is important because how long will the outer seal last? A couple of years. I'm going to use my 30-year sealant. Bullshit, that 30-year sealant is good for 3 or 4 years because where is it? It's on the freaking outside, right? Which is the important seal? The one on the inside. And what we learned is that we needed to have the inner seal 10 times tighter than the outer seal. Well, it was impossible to make the inner seal perfectly tight, so we made the outer seal deliberately leaky. So I actually fixed buildings by drilling holes in the outside to reduce the pressure difference. They freaked out. If I'd done this 200 years ago, they would have burned me at the stake in Boston as a male witch. So that's how we installed the window unit. We have an inner seal that's airtight. Then we have an outer seal on 3 sides that's open at the bottom so air can get in to pressurize the space between the inner and the outer so that we don't have water entry. This is only 3/4 of a century old, right? Which is why nobody knows it, right? So this is our future. You guys are going to be in the panel business. You know that. We know that. I just don't think the panels should be made out of steel. I think there should be wood panels with your stuff on it. But it's all about the joints, isn't it? And so what do we want? We want 2-stage joints. By the way, this is what I was doing in Toronto, Ontario in 1987, 1988, 1989. It was all EIFS panels with 2-stage joints. What's a 2-stage joint? Well, we also wrapped the entire opening before we put the window in, because what do we know about the window? It's going to leak, right? Yeah, whoa, okay. So how do you handle the panels? Well, you have an inner seal and an outer seal, and you weep the space between the inner and the outer seal. And you want to make the outer seal 10 times leakier than the inner seal. And what's kind of neat, as the outer seal ages, it actually works better. Why? Because it leaks more air, so it works actually more effectively. It's the same line I use with my wife. As I'm getting older, I'm actually leaking less. So here's, a very simple geometry. Here's a vertical joint. You know where these figures came from? 1953. All I did was added the pink color. You need to adopt this, right? Because you're in the panel business. And it doesn't have to be perfect anymore because you're controlling the driving forces, right? Right. Right. Okay, I had a lot of fun with this project. This is the Pink Palace in Orlando, just outside of Universal, right? It was EIFS, you guys knew that, right? Anybody here on that project? Anybody? No? Nobody? Okay, well, why was I involved? Okay, first of all, this was built by drug money. And people would fly in from Central America with cash, and then, believe it or not, they didn't have enough money at one point to put in the windows, so they ran the EIFS into the opening. Then they got money, and they put in the windows later. So the windows, when they leaked, didn't leak into the wall because, and then all of a sudden, no more money showed up, and nobody else flew in because those drug people got killed, and they needed to figure out who was going to buy this whatever. And so I was part of the team to figure out, well, what do we need to do to fix it? And I said, nothing. Just don't install vinyl wallpaper on the inside and suck. Look how beautiful the windows were. I said, run a bead of sealant on the inside, and all those rolls of vinyl, donate them to the homeless people in Los Angeles. That's a joke, you're not really laughing at that. Okay, where are we going? I'm almost done. Well, we're going to do rock wool. We're going to do mineral wool, but danger, Will Robinson, danger, because your windows have to be outies, because the stuff isn't strong enough to return the lamina. Come on, you know that. And so there's this actually is out of the Timber HP Builder's Guide. Why do I know that? Because they hired me to do it. And so all you need to do is put what on this? Your stuff. Wood is good, it grows on trees. Wood-based EIFS, or rock wool, or mineral wool, something, right? But you win or lose at the punched openings, aren't you? You guys will figure it out. You're smart, because you were stupid. So you were stupid then, but now you're smart because you were stupid. It's called experience. Good judgment comes from experience, and experience comes from bad judgment. I have a lot of judgment. Okay. But if you get it wrong, you have stucco pucks. See all these white spots? Because that's where the washer. And so what's the solution? Well, you guys already knew this. It's from your websites, right? So when you go to these new materials, you're going to need to do this. And the world is at your doorstep because you're going to save the planet. Thank you. You need anything? Take any skill testing question. I really mean what I said. I love continuous exterior installation, and I love your formulations. I just deal with the punched openings, right? The windows and the doors. Of course, the other stuff is the balconies, and where roofs meet walls, right? Right, and okay, we know how to do that. You know how to do this. What I haven't worked out is you need to burn some of these walls, right? And I think you should go to wood studs for high rises. Like, oh my God, I got to have an R45 wall with, an R20 bat made out of wood fiber or cellulose, which is the best use for the New York Times I can think of. And your green carbon whatchamacallit continuous insulation and your wonderful stuff on the outside, are you kidding me? And guess what? The new construction is easy. Every old building has to be redone, and you're in the driver's seat. And so if you invite me back next year, I can tell you about how to fix existing buildings.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Joe. As an older guy, I appreciate your transparency. Everything that was good. Better than your grandpa jokes too that you were telling me. I don't know if they are. Thank you, Joe. Thanks for sharing your insights and perspectives with us today. Before we leave and come back to this room for the cocktail reception, I'd like to thank OPCMIA for generously sponsoring our cocktail reception. They were organized in 1864. The OPCMIA is an affiliate member of EMA and a member of EMA's Education and Workforce Development Group. OPCMIA offers extensive training programs through the OPCMIA International Training Fund's apprenticeship program. They also partner with the federal government's Job Corps program through the National Plastering Industries Joint Apprenticeship Trust Fund. And we thank you again, OPCMIA, for sponsoring this for us. Now, Tim was going to come up and say a word, but Tim got to feeling bad and he had to step away. So hopefully he'll be okay and be back with us tomorrow. Anyway, thanks. We'll see you back here shortly, okay? Enjoy the reception.